Hello and welcome to the Can Diversity Collective's Inkwell Beach Virtual Session 2021. I am Adrienne C. Smith, founder of the Can Diversity Collective, and welcome to our 12 o'clock session, our lunch and learn, whatever you want to call it. Just know that you are about to be fed with some great thought leadership today from our extraordinary panelists. And today we're going to talk all about culture. What culture means to each of our groups, what culture, how it changes society, how it moves and just changes how we think and act and perform as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what are some of the best practices. I don't want to talk all day because I want to hear from the leaders that are on the phone, and when I tell you they're incredible, they're incredible. So I'm going to just point to someone on my screen, and they have no idea who I'm pointing to because we're all on the Zoom space. So I'm just going to say Lynn, because he's at my top right corner. Give us just a quick snippet of who you are, and then I'll just call everybody else to say who you are and what company you're from.
Sure. First, Adrienne and team, thank you for having me as part of this great panel. My name is Len Burnett. I am the Chief Revenue Officer and CEO of Hero Collective. Hero Collective consists of everything from Hero Talks, Hero Traveler, Uptown Magazine, and we build a community around content and commerce. I'm a serial entrepreneur and really happy to be here today. And quick fan out on my one of my favorite people, Isiah Thomas. I'm from the D, so got to represent. And thank you for all the rings.
Well, that was a great throw. So we're going to throw it to you, Isiah. We're going to make that pass, that basketball pass to you.
Well, I will accept that assist, and give you some childhood memories. And I remember you dunking on me in the backyard. So anyway, I'm Isiah Thomas. Most of you know me as an NBA two-time champion, also owner and CEO of Isiah International, and owner of Shirlan Champagne, the largest American and Black-owned champagne company in the United States.
Fantastic. Okay, now we're going to go down into the paint and go to Sarah Harris. Did you like that? I'm using my basketball terms.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sarah Harris, really delighted to be joining the conversation. I work for Audacy, which is an audio entertainment platform of discovery and connection. We build community around what moves people, and typically that is music, news, sports, podcasts, lifestyle, culture, and entertainment. My role is social impact, which is all the ways we operate our business in a way that is good for our business and also good for the world around us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. We're going to go to your teammate, Mica.
Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. Just making sure you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. So my name is Mica Alexis, and I am new to the Audacy team. Been there for about 5 months. My position is Director of Human Resources, also Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So I have a hybrid role embedded in our HR and our employee organization, but also assisting the organization to move its diversity, equity, and inclusion goals forward. So happy to be here and excited about this panel discussion.
Rodney, you are up next.
All right. I'm Rodney Williams, and I'm the global CEO and president of Belvedere Vodka. And we are wholly owned by LVMH.
Wonderful. If we need to have a party, we know who to call. We'll have both you.
We got you.
We have the champagne and we have Belvedere in the house. So thank you. And of course, last but not least, our partner in crime, Lincoln Stevens.
Hi, afternoon, morning, depending on where you're calling in from. Lincoln Stevens, co-founder and CEO of the Marcus Graham Project. We focus on developing the next generation of leaders in the advertising, media, and marketing industry. So excited to be here with good friends, people that I've known for some time. And Adrienne, I'm wearing the bracelet you gave to me a long time ago that says, "Be about it." So let's be about it. Excited to be here today.
Yes, that bracelet came from when we were all in the south of France in 2019. And our motto is don't talk about it, be about it. So often we hear people talking about what they should do in organizations, what they should do when in times of crisis, but we don't really see the true action behind it. So we started this this movement of don't talk about it, be about it, and being the change that we want to see. And that's when we became the first diversity, equity, and inclusion activation at the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity. So we're all about it, making some change. If our topic again is about culture, Lynn, I view you as like a culture guru icon. You've been in the business since, Vibe magazine, which is ultimately known about music culture. Tell us, what does culture mean to you, and what effect does that have on the society at large?
Well, culture in general means to me that it's the way that our people or community communicate. It's our language, it's our customs, tradition. When we talk about the urban audience specifically, oftentimes it centers around style and music and where you're from. But the reason it's so important is that the things that really track and drive culture is everything from music to fashion, our vernacular. And I think why it's so important, particularly as it pertains to marketers these days, is that it's really the way to tap into and understanding the change in culture and what is really driving overall marketplace and ultimately it's important folks' sales. So I think it's important, while we're excited about it, I've always been excited about it because as a media person, we have the opportunity to track it, to amplify, celebrate it. And so I think that's what really makes culture so important to what we do today, not only in our society, but again, to marketers. They're trying to do great things.
Who else wants to chime in and give me their definition of what culture means to them? What's your definition?
I'll add to that. As an audio entertainment company, we think of culture, as Lynn was describing it, the culture within a community of fans who identify with a specific lifestyle or entertainment that's really uniting them. We also think of culture internally in our organization as just the environment, our operating system, if you will, how we make decisions, how we communicate, how we get things done. And just in a real practical sense, we define it as our core values and our practical behaviors, the way we show up every day.
I love that you mentioned sort of the fans of the culture, which triggered for me, who actually sets the tone for culture? Who moves the culture? Who drives that? Who wants to tackle that? I saw you nodding your head, Rodney. Do you want to give us some insight of who you think drives culture?
Yeah, I think in any organization, it comes from the leadership. And Sarah mentioned the values that are actualized, on a day-to-day basis, and where things are prioritized in terms of what's getting the budget, what's getting support, what's getting focus. And of course, externally that's manifested, and the manifestation of it externally in a business like Belvedere is in the spokespeople and how we really present and engage in terms of activating.
So go ahead, Mica.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, I think by definition, agree with everything that the panel discussed as far as what culture is. I think you can also see culture as sort of the heartbeat of an organization or a group of people. So if the heartbeat is strong and it's vibrant, it pumps life and vitality through an organization. If it's weak, employees will let you know, people will let you know, parts of the organization fall ill, parts of it die. So, I liken it unto sort of a heartbeat and sort of where the source of what makes us move and operate within an organization.
Yeah, I love that. Isiah or Lincoln, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'll just, the overall definition that's been given of culture, is spot on, in terms of the language that we speak, how we interact, how we communicate. Also, I like to, venture off into the subcultures also that under the big definition now through sports and entertainment and the connectivity of all of our brands, all of our lifestyles, what happens to that creative group that comes along, that sparks the imagination, that wants to, kind of splinter off and do something a little different, that really makes us all a little better. So when you talk about language, we know language is ever evolving. How we communicate, how we bring those different languages and imagination and arts in, to really fit into our values and our vision. And every day, every week, every month, there's always the new thing that's coming up, and you want to be able to embrace that and accept it, and also bring that into your company, but also find a way where it comes into your company, where it comes into your lifestyle, where it comes into your culture, where it does positive things, negative things.
Hey,
Yeah, I was going to say, Lincoln, just go ahead and chime in, because everybody has had their voice on this and say, you go ahead.
When I think about culture, I automatically think about food. And then I automatically think about gumbo, mainly because that's what we grew up around, families from Texas and Louisiana. So I think when we think about a gumbo or a soup or a stew, are you a tomato soup and you only have a couple of things? Is your organization only allowing a couple of different ingredients? Or is it like gumbo where you can throw just about anything in it and it still makes it rich and beautiful and complex? And so, that's what it is for me. And any organization that does allow for, Isiah, as you were talking about the creativity, in our culture and food. I just finished watching High on the Hog on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, it's awesome. It evolves over time. So some aspect of it is about point of origin too. How did it start? How do you start? You build something up from the ground and add more things on top of it.
So what you both have triggered for me of subculture and then the ingredients that make that big soup, right? The question is, as we move, and I hear echo, so I don't know if anybody else hears that, we'll try to move through it. The question is, how do you make that soup taste good with all the different ingredients in it? And how do you make the broader culture work with the subcultures operating within it? So the big question is all about belonging and inclusion, in this DEI and D space. Give us some insight about how does that work? How do we make people feel like they're included and belong? Lincoln, how do you make sure that, the onions and peppers feel like they have a place in the gumbo and feel like they're included? And anybody can answer that question.
Yeah, I'll pick it up since you heard, it does start with the base. It's, if I'll stay on.
What's the base? What's the base?
If I stick to gumbo, it's the root, and it is whether you burn it from the beginning or not, and what you're able to do with it afterwards. So if I think about that from an organizational perspective, have you created something that will allow it actually to have a good flavor, meaning will it be attractive to other people coming in? And so, specifically our organization, we started off in our training, we were focused specifically around African-American men, around Black men and training. So when we pivoted and brought women into our training program, we had to recognize, especially because of myself and our co-founder were in a fraternity, did we create like a fraternity type of culture from the beginning? And that's the base. And, over the years, we've had to recognize and understand, okay, if that's the foundation of it, how do you undo it if it's necessary? Or how do you build upon it where some aspects of it will be beneficial to the whole? But I think it's recognizing whether you set the base right from the beginning.
I'd like to jump in and I'll just use my own personal experiences, in terms of what makes it work. I think there's two big words, and that's love and acceptance. Being from the west side of Chicago, spending a predominantly big portion of my professional career in Detroit and in Michigan, those were two communities that accepted me, embraced, and also gave love. Now, how did that transfer into business, and how did that transfer into organizations that I run, that I've been a part of? Is that acceptance, that love of that person, their creativity, and the acknowledgement of it, and finding a way to embrace it and make it work. Because all of us are probably on this Zoom call, the way a lot of us grew up in this country, we were counted out. And if it wasn't for other people's love and acceptance of us in those spaces where we showed up as different, where we showed up as not being ready for, someone gave us love, someone gave us acceptance, brought us in, and then made us a part of the gumbo. And through that love and acceptance, that's how the gumbo tastes good. And as a chef, who's on the Zoom call, if you don't put love into that gumbo, it ain't gonna taste as good as the person who put love into it. My mama used to cook, and I still say to this day, there's nobody make ribs better than my mama. Why? Because she put love into it.
And I love that. Len, you leaned forward. Were you going to chime in on that?
No, I think what everybody's saying is true. I think I think Rodney said it earlier, it really starts at leadership, and then being intentional. I think you just, when I think of the organizations, whether it was from Vibe in our early days to Vanguard, to even now to an Uptown and Hero, we created an environment that felt more like a family than a career or a job. And it felt like you weren't coming to work every day, and that your thoughts were important. Youth is wasted on the young. We were, when we launched Vibe, there was a lot of energy, even at Vanguard, and everyone felt that they had the opportunity to chime in and had the opportunity to provide some sort of insights or ideas that our leadership, when it was Keith and myself and Brett, we buy into. And not everything always worked out, but the idea to give them a person a chance to create an experience where they could try something and it be a safe environment to make mistakes and learn. I think that was what was really important with us. And so I think just really creating an environment and being very intentional about that is important.
Yeah, I'll just step in there, Len, and say, with the work that you guys, because I had an opportunity to be a part of the Vanguard family. So just being, as a testimony to building a culture where people believe in you and they're able, and it was a young group of folks. I know you guys were probably in your mid-30s at the time, 2 years ago, somewhere like that. But and the people that worked in Vanguard were in their 20s, and the folks today, they're doing some amazing things, are the folks who are part of the Vanguard family. But because from the top down, there was a belief that was embedded into the full culture of the organization that you could see leadership doing things in a certain way, taking risks. So it empowered everybody else to try to take risk and do the right thing, or do something that would change kind of the focus of what the industry was about. So I think that's a very important part in any organization who has the intent, the impact that you make, if it's long lasting because of what you're instilling into the folks, I think is incredible. Anyone else want to comment on that? Sarah or Mica?
I'll jump in on that, Adrienne. I like what you were saying about people sort of believing in this bigger purpose, not using those words, but I would add in, I think brands need to stand for something bigger that people can believe in. And then the culture, like the food or the gumbo, it becomes the unifying thing that people want to be at the table. They want to be a part of it. And then each team, like within an organization, contributes something different to that recipe, and allowing each team to be at their best, contributing to that gumbo, helps everyone live into their greater purpose, which is their brand purpose or building belonging as a group.
I couldn't agree more. I was going to offer up the example for Belvedere is that the purpose is really centered around celebrating the magic of nature, because Belvedere is all natural. Now, when you think of all natural or organic products, you don't necessarily think first of the African-American community, when in fact, African-American consumers are 24% more likely to have bought natural or organic products in the general market, and over-index in terms of consumption of these products. So once you have a clear idea of, what is the focus of this love, of this gumbo, the heart of the business itself, then you can really work to look strategically at ways of building the business that work against stereotype, work against myth, but really are centered on facts to move forward.
I like that point that you made. Mica, were you going to say something before?
Yeah, I'm listening to the comments, and everyone is just really beautifully articulating what it takes to build this wonderful culture. I think the key here that I'm hearing is that you got to listen, right? You've got to listen to your consumers. You have to listen to your employees to really determine what you need to focus on as leaders in driving that culture. Because if you don't, I think the society around you, your employees, will sort of steer it for you, and it could be in a direction that you're not prepared for. So, the key is listening. Totally.
Yeah, and even when Rodney was speaking about sort of the all natural product, the organic nature of the products for making their, that makes up the main Belvedere beverage. I don't know what it is, but what you tapped into for me is bringing those products, and then maybe Lincoln that helps is a part of that too, the theory of everybody bringing their authentic self, untapped, unchanged, to the table to make one fine product, one delicious product, one great organization. And if people are allowed to be their authentic selves and come to the table, and there's no gap in terms of how everyone is allowed to show up, then I think that also adds to it. Isiah, I know you started many organizations in your building. How has that authenticity made a difference in terms of the success or failure of the groups that you've worked with or organizations that you started?
Being authentic, has made a huge difference in terms of the success. And the key word that you just hit on is finding those opportunity gaps within the culture to explore, to expand. And at Sherlon Champagne, we're the largest first press producer of zero and low sugar champagne in the world. And, the market, I think, craved and wanted that product. However, the overall general market, you couldn't find a way to get your message through. And through the subcultures, through people who wanted that, through that 24% that you just identified, who gravitated to the natural, who wanted the organic, but didn't necessarily have a voice in the mainstream. How do you give them a voice, and how do you give them a place to seek out what it is that they want? So from a cultural standpoint, we know culture is fluid. We know language is fluid. But the most important thing in terms of the organizations that I've built and started is to be able to, as they say, have a big tent and embrace all, but also, listen, understand, and try to incorporate, and not become so rigid in your thinking and becoming inflexible in terms of how the world is changing, how culture changes, how language change, and how we move within a country, how we move within a state, how we move within a company, and then how we move within a family and as people. So all of those things really come into play.
If I double down on the piece that you said about changes and who makes the changes, who does the culture shift? I don't know if I asked that earlier, but maybe if we push it a little bit, who who's making the shift for us? Who's making us think differently? Who are being what I call, when I describe myself as, a professional, I say I'm an activist, an advocate, and a liberationist now in this DEI space, and getting people to change how they think about things. So that makes a culture shift. Lincoln, tell me, as you're developing young minds and people, are they the culture shifters? Who's making the culture shift?
Yeah, well, for our organization, the culture shift has come in our alumni saying, hey, well, kind of saying, y'all need to go sit down somewhere, we got this. But I think that's based upon them recognizing the things that we might have blind spots around. So, fortunately, the shift in sort of the culture of our organization is happening in a really great way and in a positive way. But I think we've seen so many examples of culture shifting because of an uprising of people that, Isiah, to your point, were not heard and did not have a voice and didn't have a space. And so that culture shift can cause a lot of heartache, right? Because of people, maybe not realizing their blind spots and then disagreeing with the things that, the folks in the company, might be saying. But I think if you, for us, it's just about sort of the natural legacy and sort of succession of people saying and recognizing that they want to step up into a role and fulfill a gap.
Anyone else want to make? Go ahead, Mica.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think that's such an important point that Lincoln brings up. I think it was Rodney that also brought it up, that leadership changes or really starts the process of shifting culture. I think employees and the workforce also help to shift that culture. So if you think about what new grads, what this next generation is looking for in employers, they're looking for a place where their values are matched. They're looking for a place where they have an important voice and they can speak up, they can speak out, they can share their opinion, share ideas without reprimand. So I think the new generation of employees that are cropping up in the workforce are going to slowly force us to shift and force us to make decisions on how we do business, how we hire, how we train, and also oftentimes makes us realize our values, right? Is this right? Are people looking for a place to express themselves, to be curious, to be courageous? So let's make sure that our values are matching what people are looking for, especially the new generation that's coming in the workforce. Yeah.
I'd like to add one thing, maybe from a little bit of a different perspective, because I agree with what everyone is saying about the leadership. It really does start at the leadership. I think it starts at, and where that leadership is at the top or middle management or someone new. Leaders are leaders, right? But I think the one thing that as a media guy who's usually speaking to the clients and advertisers, the folks that really shape and affect it, we can't underestimate the power of the consumer, right? It is the consumer, your target audience, whoever that may be. And usually for us, we're oftentimes speaking most often about African-American men and women. Those are the folks that are really changing the culture, from the outside in, right? And then as organizations, for all of our organizations, you need to adjust, not, forget the culture within your company, but how are you going to, sort of speak directly to your consumer? And if you don't have the right leadership and players in place, then you're not going to be well equipped to, keep your market share, gain your market share, whatever the position that you're trying to do. So I think it's, and again, more often than not, particularly over the last year, unfortunately and unfortunately, it is the Black and brown consumer that is really shaping these corporations, what their internal culture looks like, right? These are all good things, but we're seeing African-American men and women and a diverse group of people being put into leadership positions, because these companies felt they needed to make that choice certainly these guys and gals deserve those positions. They should have been there before, but because of the consumer and the pressure, the activism, their leadership has made companies adjust to how they're looking at how they do business. And so, I think that's just another aspect that should be considered.
I think that's a brilliant point you bring up, Len, about the outside pushing the inside, and are companies prepared to make the change? That's the big question. Once they see what the consumers are saying has to happen, are you willing to be agile and make the shift? And sometimes, what you mentioned when you said the external pressures, I heard someone say that community is the new celebrity, right? Community influencers, they're the ones who are pushing the cultures to shift within organizations, or the community at large. What is it that happens, and sometimes it's a toxic thing. If you're involved with a toxic culture, what do you do from the inside to make the shift? And I know we tapped a little bit about it, but when it's toxic, what do you do as a person working in it, or as a person viewing what the organization pushes or is selling or is emanating out, especially as a media person, Len, when it gets out into the open that your environment is toxic and, your relationship with your agency and the client is, I'll use the term again, toxic and keeping people from being their best selves. What's some suggestions that you have? How do you shift a toxic culture?
I think the thing that I've always sort of tried to do when, toxic is, that's the right word, but, as a sales guy, ultimately, you're having conversations and the whole goal is to sort of shape and or change their mind about what the consumer you represent, their buying power. And it really is, I think, the thing that's always worked for me is education. It's an education, hand-holding, walking, the clients, the agencies through what is really going on. The other thing that really, is hard to refute ultimately are the numbers. Numbers don't lie. And so what happens in the beginning, oftentimes, clients are like immediately no, because their thoughts or perceptions about what they buy. I mean, I laugh. Years ago, I was talking to a particular organization or company that represented paint, and they were like, African Americans don't. Our numbers show that African Americans don't buy paint. But the African American housing, people getting apartments, getting mortgages and things like that. Those numbers are up. So I'm like, we just don't buy paint, and so you got to sort of handhold and have conversations. You can't sort of change their mind by giving toxic back, though I've felt that way from time to time and maybe have done a few snide remarks here and there, but it's really about education and pointing the facts out.
I can add on where we are there. And I think if it's toxic, being transparent and being authentic are probably the first two steps to diffusing and getting to the reality of what is your brand about, what's happening in that relationship, and how does that need to transform to move ahead. And I'll just tell one quick story that is a silver lining story. Several years ago, we were moved as an audio entertainment company by an epidemic of death by suicide in the artist community. So this is literally toxic, where people are ending their lives. And we realized the influence of our platform and said, we need to do something about what's happening in the world around us and the community that we serve. And we launched a mental health platform called I'm Listening, that is all about ending the stigma of talking about mental health in order to save lives. And so it's transformed a lot over the years, but it came from us being authentic, serving our community, realizing that there was a toxic issue at hand, and then simply responding and saying, it's okay to not be okay. We're here as your audio companion, and we're creating space for people to share stories, to have some inspiration of healing and hope, and to help ultimately end that stigma. Good things can come from toxicity.
I'm glad that you kind of brought up mental health. Like when our alumni are working in spaces that they've recognized as being toxic, we encourage, and there have been a number of cases, especially in the last year, where the toxicity of that company was affecting mental health and physical health. And so I don't know how you necessarily change something like that quickly. There's something going on. I'm drinking some alkaline water, so I think, is it toxic or is it just too acidic? Does it need to be alkaline so that the pH level is balanced? When it gets to the point of toxicity, to a certain degree, it might be too late, right? So I know we're using specific words, but when it gets so deep where it's affecting the actual health of your employees and people, you've got to consider starting over, or removing a whole part of it that's making it such, because it's it can cause it is causing real damage to people. We're not talking about companies and brands and stuff like that. We're talking about human beings.
Yeah.
And so it's important when you think about that from a health perspective.
And to your point, Lincoln, I just joined this from having been in a review of our employee resource groups. And we probably have over a dozen now where none of them existed, 2 years ago. So there is hope of evolution. But going back to what we're talking about in terms of how do you address toxicity, I agree about the points of engagement and really it comes down to, in many cases, fear of change and challenging the status quo. And the story I'll share is that for a couple of years, we've been collaborating with Janelle Monáe as a spokesperson for Belvedere. She loves it, but she's also very outspoken and very clear about who she is. And she's also a naturalist, so she was perfect for it. And a colleague said to me, I didn't know that Belvedere has changed its strategy just to focus on African-American women. And I said, well, that's interesting because, one of our champagne brands is working with Roger Federer. I didn't know we were going after white men from Switzerland. Like the point is, Janelle speaks to everybody. She speaks to a whole global community. And it's challenging just the sort of cliched, limited lens of how people look at things that really helps us move forward in terms of change. And Lynn hit it on the head when he talked about the numbers in the business side that speak to everything. So if you can find your way to even test a different approach, a different concept, and show the validity of it, then I think you have a passage to more meaningful change.
I'd like to jump in, and all excellent points. I mean, truly. And, I'll look at it and I say that, it comes from when you identify, then you have an opportunity to get better. And that's how, we always approach things in sports. That's how, and I always go back, to my upbringing, with my mom and dad, in the family structure, and then the community structure that we are talking about, how the change really comes from the fringes. But then you have the leadership that embraces and accepts. And once, something comes in or something is there that you have to root out or take out, as opposed to rooting it out or taking it out, can you make it better? And if you can make it better, can we all get better? But if you have to remove it, then that still makes the soup or the gumbo better. And so I look at all these challenges, as opportunities to get better, to become better, and to keep moving forward. Because no organization is perfect. No person is perfect. We live in a very imperfect world. So we're all striving for how do we get better and how do we keep learning?
I think those were all great points to my question on toxicity. And I'm going to push a little bit in our last 4 minutes. Lincoln, you touched on a little bit, and I think Isiah, you said a little bit about it. You know, are you for purging the system, or purging, you know, when you see these bad things happening, do you just cut them off and start anew? Like, and I think, Rodney, you said there's a fear of culture shift too. But what about just purging the system? If you do an assessment, if we were to do a cultural assessment of your organization and you see where those bad outliers are, those bad problems, should we cut them out? What should we do? Should we give them training to say, this is where you're deficient? You know, this is my theory. We do a cultural assessment. We see where the bad person is. We give them a chance, but in the event that they don't, I say cut them loose, purge them out. What are your thoughts on that?
Are you asking my thoughts?
I'm asking anybody, because I swing with a big P. Purge them out. What do you say?
I believe in second chances, and I believe in learning and getting better. And again, I only go back to my childhood and how I was viewed growing up. And you know, we talk about numbers, data, and statistics. You know, I was supposed to be dead at 18 and never make it. And but because people gave me second, third chances, I was able to get better. And inside an organization, unless that apple is just so rotten to the core, that's when you talk about purging. But if that apple is maybe you can peel the skin off of it, take a little bit of it, and you know, the core of it is bad, so you may have to get rid of that. But can that person change? Can he or she become better? And that's what I believe in. I believe in trying to help people, trying to make them better, trying to give them second, sometimes even third chances. In my organization, we deal with people who have come out of prison, some on their way to prison, and then we have PhDs and college graduates working in the same space. Culturally, they may come from two different places in terms of understanding, but what we have found and what we do find is once they get together and they start keyword, language, and communicating, they both learn different things from each other. And how do we take that learning, that education, and apply it to our organization and make our organization better?
Adrian, I don't know why you, when you said that, the roof is on fire, we don't need no water, came to mind. And Isiah, I definitely believe in second and third chances. I think we should extend grace. There are some things, like even just the conversation about diversity in our industry of advertising agencies. I'll talk about that separately, marketing. Let it burn. You've had multiple opportunities to fix some of the challenges, whether it's from a diversity and inclusion perspective, or whether it's just from a structural perspective. And you know, when you see shifts of people bringing a lot of work in-house and so forth, it's an indication that people are saying, hey, we've been telling you the roof has been on fire for decades. And so at some point in time, the people that had the ability to extinguish it are moving out and letting it burn. And it's not a bad thing, because you can rebuild something back up. Some things at their core that did not have a good foundation, just have to build something back up. So I don't know why that song came in my head now. It's gonna be stuck in my head the whole day.
You're such a radical, that's why.
Yeah, now the roof is on fire.
Burn!
I think now that's what everybody's going to take out of this entire culture. Is the roof is on fire.
Send out some Belvedere. I could have finished the whole album.
Well, I mean, I actually agree with you, but coming from a different angle in that, yes, I think people definitely deserve second chances, and education, as we talked about earlier, is key. There's just a lot of naivete in the culture. People don't know what they don't know. And, being people of color, being women, you bring to the business world an enhanced perspective, just because of your lived experience. But I think ultimately, if the leadership is serious about moving in a different direction, everybody in the organization, including the agents of toxicity, will recognize that the behaviors that are going to be rewarded and promoted going forward, and need to make some shifts. So, I can tell you that in our own organization, it's been heartening to see, out of the tragedy of the Breonna Taylors and the George Floyds, the cathartic discussions that we've had about social justice and racial justice in the U.S. And particularly people who've not been exposed to these issues in a personal way, who have sought out more information. So I think it can be hopeful.
I think we could take this conversation on the road. Oh, maybe we can go to Martha's Vineyard in August 10th through the 12th. Do you like that segue to promote my own thing? But I have to thank you guys so much. This conversation was really great, better than I had hoped it to be, with some key takeaways of the roof, no, not that one. There's more of, we have to add grace, educate, I think is kind of the theme for folks to improve and accept folks for who they are, the role that they play with and being their most authentic selves, I think is one of the key things to build a strong culture and be able to sort of fix the toxicity by rethinking, resetting, and starting again. So thank you all for joining. Lynn Burnett, Sarah Harris, Isiah Thomas, Rodney Williams, Mica, Alexis, and Lincoln Stevens. You have been a joy to spend this last 48 minutes with, and hopefully you'll join us again. We're getting prepped up for our next session that's coming up. It's going to be really loud with Roland Martin, Walter Gear. We've got Monique Nelson and Gabrielle Sheridan. So please join us at 1 o'clock for that session. It's going to be on fire like this was on fire. So we have water. Lincoln, thanks for setting the tone for the next panel. And we will see you guys again. Thank you again. And we'll see you in August, I hope. There's an open invitation to join us in Martha's Vineyard at the original Inkwell Beach. We'll see you there.
Thanks, Adrienne.
Thank you.